All praises to Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai. All praises to Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone. May Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai's peace be bestowed unto you, hopefully elect. I'm your brother Yahweh Call from the Great Millstone, Orlando. I don't know what I'm going to title this yet, but it just, of course, it has to do with prophecy. Being that, like it tells in Isaiah 2, as well as, I believe that's Micah, the 4th chapter. Roughly paraphrasing on how, basically the nations, they're not going to learn war anymore. When the true people of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai are set up and established, and that government is set up on the earth, all these nations, again, they're not going to know war anymore. The scriptures going to Joel how the nations are going to, because right now, speaking of Joel, the nations are turning their plowshares into pruning hooks. Their spears, they're turning their plowshares into roughly paraphrasing. Basically, in not so many words, the resources that they get, that's supposed to be establishing their economies, building up their economies, well, they're using that for warfare, building up missiles and things of that nature, defense systems and things of that nature. But again, when you go into Isaiah 2, Micah 4, it's worded the opposite. Turning their spears into pruning hooks. But again, Isaiah 2 and Micah 4, they're going to be turning it's basically going to be the opposite, all right? Because when it's all said and done, again, when the government of Israel is established on earth, these nations, they're going to get their plot of land. They're going to go back to their respective lands, all right, and be tributaries to the Israelites, all right? So clearly that's not happening right now, which goes to show you, that's just one of many things to show us that the real people of Yahweh Bahashim Yahweh Shai, the real chosen people, are not in power. All right, and as we've been seeing, and hell, even over the decades, it's not until recently, where you have tensions this high. But ever since the Balfour Declaration, which is why we call them the 1948ers, one of their code names, because if I'm not mistaken, when you go into the Balfour Declaration, I believe they had a war that night. War broke out that night, or maybe that next day. But nevertheless, again, it just goes to show you that they are not the real people. They're not the real chosen people. Those in that land right now, and all those other nations, for that matter, fighting over something that doesn't belong to none of them. And that's why I don't want to get into Amos and Salakia. I'm going for this walk. I was trying to sit down to do this video, but as soon as I was getting ready to sit down and getting ready to do this video, damn Esau wants to sit his dirty ass next to me. So I decided to get up and leave. And as I was on my way to the spot, I did a video, just a chat with the church, a walk and talk, a spiritual rant. That video will be uploaded later. But I did that video before this one, because like I said, as I was on my way to the spot, the Spirit was just on me to do that spiritual rant. I originally wanted to do this video first, which is why I came out here in the first place. You know, but I just say that to say, because just bear with me, as I get my bearings, and that's why I wanted to sit down, be a little more concentrated. But like I said, Esau's dirty ass wanted to sit next to me as soon as I was getting ready to record the video. So I'm gonna be a little out of breath. I'm gonna be a little, out of it. So just bear with me. Wish I would stop hesitating, man, and just Salaki. I gotta cross the street because Esau doesn't give a damn about a so-called Negro. Let me just cross the street. So bear with me as I get my bearings. Try to keep my shit together. But clearly those people are not the people in the Bible. Those people in the land are not the chosen people, and all those nations for that matter. You see, there's coming a time when all those nations, the job of those missiles, man, they're going to wipe out that whole area, which is why I want to touch on Amos 1 and 2, Lord willing. But again, if these people, because those 1948ers, which is, again, we call them that because that's one of the code names, because that's when the Balfour Declaration, you can look into that, which, to them, that was the fulfillment of prophecy, but again, if that was the case, where's Yahushua? Where's King David? For one, Yahushua is the one that's going to put the people over there in the land. So where's Yahushua? King David is supposed to reign when the people are in the land. So again, just more signs to show you that those are not the people. And again, because these guys try to fulfill prophecy, because what are they doing? Which, it goes back to the scriptures. They catch themselves trying to fulfill the scriptures. When it comes to, the Palestinians, which the real Palestinians were Hamitic, but, them over there, the Gaza Strip or whatnot, how they're trying to drive the nations out. Like I said, that's the way of trying to fulfill prophecy, But nevertheless, all those nations over there, the Lord's going to get all their asses up out of there. So I just have a few videos here, just to show, again, one of many signifiers to show you that these are not the people. Because why is there war going on over there? Why is there chaos, bloodshed? Why is there no peace? And not only that, just to also give just a glimpse to show what's coming here to America. As a little sidebar. Right, so without further ado, and of course I'm not making any type of monetary gain off of any of these clips. This is just for informational purposes. So without further ado, copyright disclaimer. So again, because in this clip, man, they gotta basically go on this rescue mission to take whatever this individual, this heathen, to the hospital. But just the fact that, it's almost as if, like the scriptures say, being like a chase row, trying to dodge missiles, trying to avoid getting deleted. Again, where's the peace? If these were the people, the chosen people, where's the peace? You know, if these were the chosen people, they shouldn't be living like this, you know. In this video, you know, these videos is a mixture of, you know, both sides, but overall showing that the chosen people are not in the land. That's the overall message, you know.
I'm about to enter the living room to our house right now. The house that I grew up in. The house that all my memories are in. The house where I lost all my loved ones in. I used to play this with my siblings all the time. We had a computer downstairs. Are you kidding me right now? This was the living room of our house.
So you pretty much get the memo there, you know. Again, why is there no peace in the so-called Middle East? Because the real people aren't in power yet. The real people aren't established. You see? Now, you know, this, I just had this clip because you see the terror, the fear, the shock in this child's eyes. You see the shock, man. If these were the holy people of the land, why are they living like this, you know? And even going back to this clip, because, you know, they try to play this sad music, make you, you know, get all emotionally involved, emotionally attached, you know? But again, Yahweh Shema Shai, he's getting rid of all y'all asses, man. You know? He's getting rid of all of y'all asses. And not only that, he's touching off of what y'all did to the Lord's people. Because y'all got to pay. Your nations, y'all got to pay.
تعال يا ابو تعال ايش بتاكل؟ شو هذا؟ لا تاكل اشياء
So, why are they living like this over there in the so-called Middle East? If, you know, the holy and chosen people are over there, why are they still living like this? You know? And like I said, I got a lot of videos from both sides, but you know, just for the sake of, you know, a certain group of individuals that you can't speak about, you know, I'm not gonna play too many videos, but this is the same chick from earlier.
north of the Gaza Strip. The wars come back, and day by day, the situation is going to becoming more worse and worse. We are finished. We home.
And this is normal over there, like she said. You know, you had there was this Benjamite, one of these passport bros, that went over there right when this conflict escalated to what it is now. Iran and Israel going at it, you know. You had a passport bro go over there, you know, and you had the one so-called Iranian, he was recording them, you know, and he was asking them, basically, are you having a good time? You know, and of course, the Jake was scared, you know, but the Iranian, he was telling him, hey, this is how it is every day. You know, this is normal for them. You know, in that whole region, you know, that whole area over there, man. This is normal. Bombs going off. I posted one video. I said, damn, you know. I showed one video to the brothers where some school got blown up. You know, and there was a 5-year-old girl, man, walking through the fire. You know, like damn. You know, over there in I believe it was the Gaza Strip. But yeah, damn school's on fire, man. You saw this little 5-year-old girl just walking through. You know, she you could tell it was fresh because she just got up, she just popped up, and she was, you know, walking through the shit like damn. You know. So again, with all that being said, why is there no peace in the so-called Middle East? You know, why is there nothing but warfare? Which again, this is what's common over there. You know, this is what's common over there. This is their normal. Talk about new normal. This is their normal. There was another video where, you know, before this conflict popped off, there was a before and after of the Gaza Strip, man. And, you know, an aerial view, and that shit was looking nice. That shit was beautiful. And then they showed the devastation. You know, they showed the aftermath, man. Same place, just ruins, desolate. You know. And like I said, on another note, a lesson within a lesson, man. Hey, that's what's gonna come to America. This is gonna be America's new normal. You know, bombs going off. You know, trying to, you know, run place to place, hoping that you don't get hit, hoping that a bomb doesn't drop on your head, hoping that you don't get Gaza stripped, you know, hoping that you don't get blown up or whatever the case may be. You know, just hoping, living a life of constant fear, because you don't know. You know, like I quoted, being like a chase road, just, you know, every move, you don't know if it's going to be your last move. You just don't know. You know, and that's a horrible feeling. That feeling of not knowing, that's a horrible feeling. You know, but that's why our trust is going to be in Yahweh Shema Shai. All right, so with that being said, now I want to go to this. In Amos 1. Because like I said, there's no peace in the so-called Middle East because Yahweh Shema Shai, he's going to get all their asses, man. He's going to clear that whole area out. In particular, Israel. All right. Amos 1:1. It's a lot, yeah. I'm across the street. Esau doesn't give a damn about a so-called Negro. Across the street. Just bear with me. Whew. I was gonna sit down, but I'm almost where I need to be. Out of all places, Esau could have took his ass somewhere else. He had to sit next to me. That's all right. Because brothers claim women. But I claim women. I claim children too. Because 2/3, Lord will not be a man of the Lord. You know, I claim children too, because two-thirds, they be acting a damn fool. You know, you ever wonder why Jake, man, a two-thirds just come up to you, man, and you know, it's just like they want your attention. Well, hey, they're speaking to their father, you know. So that's how I take it. So I claim children. You know, not only that, I claim heathens too. I claim slaves too. So that's what that was. You know, the slave choosing his master, and that's all right. I choose you too. So that's what I was. Amos 101. The words of Amos, who was among the herdmen of Tekoa, which he saw concerning Israel in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel, 2 years before the earthquake. And he said, the Lord will roar from Zion and utter his voice from Jerusalem, and the habitations of the shepherds shall mourn, and the top of Carmel shall wither. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Damascus, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have threshed Gilead with threshing instruments of iron. And you know, when you go into it, because overall, again, in that particular land of Israel, you know, the land of Canaan, you know, you had all these particular nations, you know, committing abominations, you know, yeah, because even the heathens, when you go into the history, the heathens, they were committing abominations, right? You know, and you know, ultimately that's why the Lord kicked us out of the land, because you know, we were defiling the land, you know, because when you read these first chapters, this chapter, and I'm gonna read chapter 2 as well, you know, the Lord's getting on the nations, but the rest of the chapters, man, the Lord's getting on Jake. You know, the Lord's getting on the nations, but he's getting on Jake too. Jake mainly throughout the chapters, you know, because again, you know, just the wickedness. That's why I said for 3 transgressions of Damascus, and for 4. So you see the iniquities being piled up. The Lord is counting, you know. You know, the iniquities are stacking up. That's what iniquities are, you know, sin upon sin upon sin, you know. And the Lord's just sitting back, allowing all this shit to stack up, man, you know, amongst all the nations, all the nations that were, you know, in this region at that time. And, you know, ultimately, the Lord sent the Assyrians to pretty much conquer all these nations, you know. It says, verse 4, but I will send a fire into the house of Hazael, which shall devour the palaces of Benadad. Pretty much talking about the same thing, you know, the kings in that of that region, so to say, you know, because you know you had, you know, small towns within. That's why I mentioned like the palaces, you know. It says verse 5, I will break also the bar of Damascus, and cut in the inhabitant from the plain of Avon, and him that holdeth the sepulchre from the house of Eden, and the people of Syria shall go into captivity unto Kir, saith the Lord. And that's not to confuse Syria, because that's, again, you know, when you look at the ancient map of Canaan, you know, going into Damascus, when it's talking about Syria, it's talking about the same thing, all right? You know, Aram, which is not to be confused with Ashur, which Ashur was the Assyrians. So that's not to confuse the Syrians with the Assyrians, all right? Because again, the Lord sent the Assyrians to pretty much conquer all these nations, all right? It says, thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Gaza, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they carried away captive the whole captivity to deliver them up to Edom. So you see, and like I said, you know, well, again, the original Palestinians, they were Hamites, you know. It says, but I will send a fire on the wall of Gaza, which shall devour the palaces thereof. So that Gaza Strip, you know, and all the you know, the small towns within, so to say, right? And I will cut off the inhabitant from Ashdod, and him that holdeth the sepulchre from Ashkelon, and will turn mine hand against Ekron. So all those places over there in that Gaza Strip. Again, when you look at that ancient land of Canaan map, all right, you know, all these places is you know, talking about the same thing. It's right there on that Gaza Strip. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Tyrus, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishments thereof, because they delivered up the whole captivity of Edom, and remember not the brotherly love, the brotherly covenant. Could you see, you know, basically, and again, all these nations over there, for the most part, like it goes on to mention Ham, Ammon, Esau, you know, these nations, aside from Ham, of course, you know, they're Shemitic. So, you know, mention this brotherly covenant, because, you know, Jake made certain of these covenant with certain of these nations, and all these nations at some point broke the covenant, you know, that they made with Jake. You know, so you know how the Lord gets down. You know, he kills 2 birds with 1 stone. You know, yeah, Jake was going off, but he used these nations to come against Jake. Like the scriptures say, they furthered the affliction. So he used these nations to come against Jake, just to justify and getting these nations. You see? But it says, but I will send a fire on the wall of Tyrus, which shall devour the palaces thereof. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Edom, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he did pursue his brother with the sword, and did cast off all pity, and his anger did tear perpetually, and he kept his wrath forever. And you know, it goes to show you that, you know, because for one, it's always been about Jacob and Esau, you know, the main characters in the Lord's movie, and they're still here. Esau's still here. You know, you got some clowns out here talking about Esau's done away with, you know, because it talks about this perpetual anger and hatred, you know. And, you know, again, it goes to show you that these 2 characters, especially Esau in particular, they're still here. But I will send a fire upon Teman, which shall devour the palaces of Bosra, which I do believe this was southern. Like they mentioned Tyrus, you know, that was more northern Israel, and now we're jumping to more southern Israel. You know, it mentioned the Gaza Strip earlier. You know, Ashkelon, Ekron, that was more western. You know, again, that Gaza Strip. Verse 13. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of the children of Ammon, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have ripped up women with child of Gilead, that they might enlarge their border. You see, it was you know, that whole land over there, which is, it's also known as the land of milk and honey. You know, it's a very fruitful land, you know. So, you know, when you go into the history, you know, these nations, man, they were basically fighting to expand their territory, you know. And them Ammon, they committed some atrocious acts as well, you know. So, you know, the Lord's calling out each and all these nations. You know, like I said, you know, the Lord is counting the transgressions. You know, the iniquity, the sins upon sins. It says, but I will kindle a fire in the wall of Rabbah, which was basically the capital city in Ammon, if I'm not mistaken, and it shall devour the palaces thereof, and shouting in the day of battle, with the tempest in the day of the whirlwind. And as a matter of fact, jumping back up to 12, it said, but I will send a fire upon Teman, which shall devour the palaces of Bosra, which Teman, being, if I'm not mistaken, a capital place in Bosra, if I'm not mistaken, you know. And what's cold is that word Bosra goes into it's like a sheep enclosure, you know, and it's, you know, it's spiritual, you know. It reminds me of, you know, how America, you know, being that the spiritual Egypt, the land of bondage, you know, where the modern day Pharaoh refusing to let the children of Israel grow. You know, it also mentioned Tyrus in this chapter, right? You know, spiritual Esau, he's that spiritual Tyrus. Scriptures mention the prince of Tyrus. You know, Esau, he's that spiritual Egyptian. He's a spiritual Pharaoh. You know, because no new thing under the sun. you know, and verse 15, it says, and their king shall go into captivity, he and his princes together, saith the Lord. Now I'm going to jump over to verse 2, or chapter 2. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Moab, and for 4, I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because he turned the bones of the king of Edom into lime. But I will send a fire upon Moab, and it shall devour the palaces of Kerioth, and Moab shall die with tumult, with shouting, and with the sound of the trumpet. And I will cut off the judge from the midst thereof, and will slay all the princes thereof with him, saith the Lord. So like I said, you know, there's all these nations were committing atrocities, committing abominations. Not only that, they were doing it in the land. See if I can find this. I think that's 1 Kings 3 to speak on Moab. It might be 2 Kings. Yeah, 2 Kings chapter 2. I'm sorry, 2 Kings chapter 3. I'm going to start at 26. And when the king of Moab saw that the battle was too sore for him, because, you know, like I said, you know, nations were fighting at that time to expand their territory, because, you know, the land of milk and honey, the land of Canaan, which is going to be our headquarters, you know, that's why the Lord's going to clear that whole area out, you know, and I'm going to further expand on that point when I get back into Amos, you know. But they were fighting for territory, committing all type of treasonous acts, you know, like I mentioned on Moab. They were literally, you know, cutting our woman open, the babies. They were doing all type of atrocious acts. But not only that, they were doing it in the land. All right. You know, and that's why, hey, the Lord sent the Assyrians. Not the Syrians, but the Assyrians. All right. Had all those nations in captivity, you know. And again, Esau, he's a modern day Assyrian. America is also known as Assyria. All right. So, verse 26 again. And when the king of Moab saw that the battle was too sore for him, he took with him 700 men that drew swords to break through even unto the king of Edom, but they could not. Why? Because again, they were fighting for territory. But Moab, he was not prevailing. All right, he was not getting through. So what did he do? Verse 27, then he took his eldest son that should have reigned in his stead, and offered him for a burnt offering upon the wall. And there was great indignation against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. So you see, committing child sacrifice, doing all this. That's why I like the scriptures talk about, you know, you defile the land, you know, the land has to be cleansed by him that shed the blood. So that's why, like I said, the Lord, hey, you know, he did it before, and he's getting ready to do it again. And that's the point that I want to make. All right, the Lord's getting ready to clear that whole area out again. All right, so that's just one of many examples. Like I said, when you're going through the history, what these particular nations, what they were doing, all right, the Lord got all the asses up out of there. Going back to Amos 2, getting on Jake now, right? Amos 2 and 4. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Judah, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they have despised the law of the Lord, and have not kept his commandments, and their lies caused them to err, after the which their fathers have walked. Because you see, again, when you get into the history, Jake is a piece of shit, you know. Matter of fact, let's read on, because it gets on northern kingdom too. But I will send a fire upon Judah, and it shall devour the palaces of Jerusalem. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they sold the righteous for silver, and the poor for a pair of shoes. So you see, because what was Jake doing? They were preying off of the poor. Again, when you get into the history of what Jake was doing, all right, Jake was basically putting, like what we see to Esau. You know, Esau, he gives out these loans that, you know, damn well, especially in particular when it comes to Jake, Esau gives these loans that he knows Jake is not going to be able to pay back, you know, and that way he's got you, you know. Slocky, let me cross the street. Esau doesn't give a damn about a Negro, a so-called Negro. Let me cross the street. Bear with me. So that's what I was talking about, dealing with the Judah, you know, the southern kingdom, you know, again, basically, and that's why, like I said, you know, for 3 transgressions and for 4, you know, because Jake was just, it was iniquity, sin upon sin. You know, here it is, and we see this today, you know, Jake bounds, you know, these so-called leaders, they bound Jake by the law, knowing damn well we can't keep the law, right? You know, but they put extra conditions on top of, you know, they put extra conditions, basically making it more harder, more difficult, you know, keeping Jake under a yoke, you know. Yeah, again, when you really go into it, you know, Jake was, like I said, you know, taking certain things, which, you know, it's in our law not to do so. Let me see if I can find that. Deuteronomy 24. You know, that's why we have these laws, man, how to deal with the poor. Basically, those are the less fortunate, you know. But Jake, they didn't give a shit. They were completely taking advantage of Jake, preying on Jake, you know. This might not be it. Yep, this is it. The Wadi Abashimo Shai. In Deuteronomy 24. I'm going to start at verse 9. Remember what the Lord that power did unto Miriam. By the way, after that ye were come forth out of Egypt, when thou doest lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. Thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou doest lend shall bring out the pledge abroad unto thee. And if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. In any case, thou shalt deliver him to the pledge again when the sun goeth down, that he may sleep in his own raiment, and bless thee. And it shall be righteousness unto thee before Yahweh thy power. So you see, and this is what they was going into. All right, you know, because like I said, in verse 11 or verse 10 again, when thou doest lend thy brother anything, thou shalt not go into his house to fetch his pledge. And it mentions, thou shalt stand abroad, and the man to whom thou doest lend shall bring out the pledge abroad unto thee. And if the man be poor, thou shalt not sleep with his pledge. So you see, verse 13, in any case, thou shalt deliver him the pledge again when the sun goeth down, that he may sleep in his own raiments. So you see, and this is what Jake was doing. All right. You know, as it just said there, you know, but this is what Judah was doing. Like I said, all right. You know, Jake was going in the house, you know, taking the shirt, you know, knowing damn well Jake wouldn't be able to pay that, you know, pay it back, you know, and it would take that shirt, you know. In some instances, in some cases, that's why it's mentioned in Deuteronomy, the law, you know, you're not supposed to because what they would do was pretty much, because, you know, they had the temple harlots and things of that nature, you know, they had those temple harlots, you know, and they would have that shirt, you know, let's say they didn't like the shirt, or the shirt didn't fit, or whatever the case may be. Instead of giving it back, they would take it to the temple with the temple harlot as a sacrifice, you know, pretty much. You know, it's just completely wicked when you go into it. You know, this is why the Lord said, hey, I will know, you know, it got to the point where the Lord stopped accepting our sacrifices. You know, the Lord got tired of it. So this is what this is going into. And again, the Lord's watching all this shit. He's seeing all this shit going down. That's why, again, he's counting for 3 transgressions for 4. It's just sin upon sin. It's just sin upon sin. You know, back in Amos 2:6, thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Israel, and for 4 I will not turn away the punishment thereof, because they sold the righteous for silver and the poor for a pair of shoes. And again, you know, Jake, they were what we see today. You know, Jake, they sell their own people out. You know, and it was the same shit back then. All right, Jake, they would, you know, work hand in hand with the enemy to sell their own people out. It's the same shit, man. You know, it says that pant after the dust of the earth on the head of the poor and turn aside the way of the meek. And a man and his father will go in unto the same maid to profane my holy name. So, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. You know, Apostle Paul was cursing Jake out in Corinthians about doing the same shit. You know. So hey, and obviously the land of Judah, the land of Israel. You know, I mean, obviously this is all over there in the land of you know, Canaan. You know. So, well, I'll finish the chapter out. It's not many verses. It says, and they lay themselves upon clothes laid to pledge by every altar, and they drank the wine of the condemned in the house of their power. So you see, all right, committing all type of wicked, abominable sacrifices unto Yahweh Shema Shai, which does, again, this is why the Lord didn't accept these sacrifices after a while. All right, you know, it says, yet destroyed I the Amorite before them, whose height was like the height of the cedars, and he was strong as the oaks. Yet I destroyed his fruit from above and his roots from beneath. Also I brought you up from the land of Egypt and led you 40 years through the wilderness to possess the land of the Amorite. So you see, the Lord is like, aren't these the same niggas and niggerettes that I delivered out of the land of Egypt? You know, that's why, you know, you hear us say all the time, hey, you know, hey, as far as this ass whooping, we earned this shit. We earned this. In fact, we asked for this shit. We provoked the Lord for this shit. We deserve this shit. You know, we earned this. It says, verse 12, but ye gave the Nazarites wine to drink, which obviously Nazarites, you know, they're not supposed to drink wine, and commanded the prophet, saying, prophesy not. So it was just all a shit show. You know, it was all a shit show. Slakia, I skipped verse 11. Verse 11, and I raised up for your sons for prophets and for your young men for Nazarites. Is it not even thus, O ye children of Israel, saith the Lord? So you see, because listen, the Lord, there was always men around to you know, basically lead Jake in the right direction. You know, there was always these men around to you know, the mediators. You know, the Lord always had his mediators around, but Jake said, "To hell with them." You know, that's why in verse 12 now it says, "But ye gave the Nazarites wine to drink, and commanded the prophets, saying, prophesy not." That's why it tells you in Jeremiah 15, hey, I gave them Moses and Samuel. You know, matter of fact, let me go to that real quick because I'm butchering it. In Jeremiah 15:1, then said the Lord unto me, though Moses and Samuel stood before me, yet my mind could not be toward this people. Cast them out of my sight and let them go forth. So, like I said, did we not deserve this ass whooping? You know, like the scripture say, man, hey, why do the man complain less? Or why do the man complain? You know, why do the man complain? We earned this. When you really get into the history, because there's one, like the scriptures talk about how, you know, worshiping other idols, right? Other gods, right? But you got to think, well, you got to know, because it was more than just worshiping, bowing down to reverence to these idols. You know, there was acts that was to be done when it came to the worshiping of these idols. There was acts that were committed. So, you know, like such as sacrificing children to Molech, right? And so on and so forth, sleeping with the you know, temple harlots, all manner of abominable things, man. All right, all acts all manner of abominable things. So, like I said, rightfully so, we deserve this ass whooping. We deserve this ass whooping. We deserve to be here. You know, it says verse 14. Well, verse 13. It says, "Behold, I am pressed unto you, as a cart is pressed that is full of sheaves." So basically, man, the Lord said, enough is enough. The Lord got tired of Jake's shit. All right. It says, "Therefore the flight shall perish from the swift, and the strong shall not strengthen his force, neither shall the mighty deliver himself. Neither shall he stand that handleth the bow, and he that is swift of foot shall not deliver himself. Neither shall he that rideth the horse deliver himself. And he that is courageous among the mighty shall flee away naked in that day, saith the Lord." So, obviously, again, the Lord drove us out of the land. Obviously, we basically had a military and everything, but the Lord took all that shit from us. Like I said, we're over here on the other side of the world, through and through. We are finished. All right, look at us now. But the point that I wanted to make out of both these chapters was, because again, yeah, this happened at a point in time when you go into the history. Like I said, the Lord sent the Assyrians, and pretty much took all these nations over there, called all these nations out, including Israel. All right, northern and southern kingdom. All right, took all those nations, man, by the Assyrians. But again, throughout the chapters, it mentions how the Lord was going to send that fire. All right. And that didn't happen yet. So that's the point that I wanted to make overall. All right, the fire that's getting ready to come. All right, again, that whole land over there, that whole land mass over there, the Lord's going to clear that whole shit out. All right. And like the point that I was making earlier, why is there no peace in the Middle East, the so-called Middle East? Obviously, the real people are not in the land right now. And naturally, and we see in accounts of this, like I use the example with I read the scripture with Moab, how they were, committing child sacrifices, right? And again, there was all type of abominable things going on in the land. So that's why the Lord basically cleared the whole area out. He did it before. He did it before. Because when you go into the book of Baruch, man, it goes into how, hey, man, the motherland, man, what they call the motherland. She's crying out for her children to come back home. Why? Because the land is being polluted. The land is being polluted. All right. There's this plague that's plaguing our land right now, man. And again, the earth is a living organism. Like the scriptures say, the earth is going to fight back against this damn devil, Esau. All right. Because again, the earth is alive. It's leaving. It's breathing. It's alive. And likewise, the motherland itself. All right, the land of Israel itself. But there's a foreign entity in the land, and we've seen accounts of that when wicked acts were committed in the land. What happened? We see different accounts where the Lord sent lions, right, to drive the heathen out, right. And that's what we see now through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai. All right, the Lord is because it's like if you eat something that's not natural, naturally, you put something foreign into the body, naturally the body's going to reject it, and this is what we see. All right, there's something foreign in our land, and naturally the land is trying to get rid of it. The land itself is trying to spew it out because it's a foreign entity, it's a foreign object. Likewise, on another note, like the MOTB, that's a foreign object, man, that's going to be put inside of the body. That's why when people take that MOTB, that's why people are going to be having adverse reactions, just like what we've seen with the with the jab. What we've seen with the jab, man. It's going to be a lot worse when that MOTB comes around. People will be getting cancer, all type of shit, man. It's going to be all type of adverse reactions because it's a foreign object in the body. So right now you have a foreign entity in the land, and that's why we see, all this uproar and tumult. That's basically the land's way of trying to get rid of this foreign entity, this unnatural entity. So this is why, again, ultimately the land is fighting against all those heathens over there, man. Fighting for something that doesn't belong to none one of them. But that's, again, I just wanted to bring these two chapters out real quick. Because like I mentioned, the Lord sending that fire, right? And that's ultimately, again, what those missiles are going to do. Because that's going to be our headquarters. We talk about America's destruction. America's going to be completely destroyed. But likewise, Israel, that whole landmass over there. The only difference is America's not going to be built back up. Israel is going to get built back up because that's going to be our headquarters. And like I said, the land itself is she's crying for her children to come home. The whole earth groaneth, is earnestly waiting for this, the manifestations of the sons of God, man. But the land itself is crying for her children to come back home. The earth is crying out to the Lord, man. The land of Israel is crying out to the Lord. You see? But that's what the Lord's getting ready to do, all right? He's getting ready to clear that whole area out over there. And this is why there's no peace in the so-called Middle East, because the true people of the land are not ruling. They're not in the land. Contrary to the whole 1948 Balfour Declaration, man, which shows you that these are not the people. So, Lord, when this was edifying, all praises to you. How about Shema Shai? Shalom to you. Hopefully, let